Today's history video is about the Watergate scandal, and it's brought to you by the Patriot Gold Group. In 1972, Nixon coasted to an easy victory over George McGovern, the Democratic candidate for president. And the major issue was the war in Vietnam, which had persisted throughout Nixon's first term and killed his ratings with the public. But Henry Kissinger, Nixon's Secretary of State, was busily negotiating a solution to the war during Nixon's first term, and right before Election Day in 1992, announced dramatically that peace is at hand and that the Vietnam War would soon be over. Today's lunch alert is sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. The clients of Bank of America sold $7 billion in stocks last week, the largest amount since 2020. Institutional clients, pension funds, and hedge funds were the biggest sellers. This turned out to be wrong because the negotiations were in fact in the middle, and it took almost 4 months or 5 months and more bombing for the war to begin to end. But the effect of the announcement was dramatic and vaulted Nixon to an unbelievable sweep of the election against McGovern. As Nixon was racking up his victory margin, bitterness among the Democrats continued because it was very clear that they had been fooled by the Kissinger announcement, and anger about Nixon's continuing the war continued and indeed mounted. During this period, Nixon was investigated for a variety of dirty tricks that he did while in the White House with members of his staff. One of them was that Senator Ed Muskie was going to oppose him in 92 and was probably the best candidate the Democrats had, was fooled into using the word Canuck slang to describe French Canadians, and in New Hampshire that was deadly. There were other dirty tricks too. Nixon broke into the office of Daniel Ellsberg, the psychiatrist who documented the Pentagon Papers, and tried to smear him as being mentally unstable. Nixon also arranged for massive amounts of cash to be deposited into his campaign right before the deadline for reporting cash loomed in 1972. All this culminated in 1972 when a group of Cuban burglars broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters and ransacked the files. Nobody knew what they were after or who they were, but they were discovered when a security guard at the Watergate complex, which had just been built, discovered a door with its latch taped so it wouldn't lock automatically. He went in and investigated, and they found the Cuban burglars rifling through the files of the Democratic Committee. The Cubans were arrested, and investigation began as to what they were doing there. Apparently, they had been paid by E. Howard Hunt, a former CIA agent who was working for Nixon, and we never quite established what they were doing in the Democratic headquarters, but it was, of course, a crime. They were all arrested, and at the trial, the plea hearing, the judge, John Sirica, refused just to accept a plea and demanded to investigate how the burglary came to be. The money was traced to a Nixon account, and the Watergate scandal was off. It proceeded for 2 years, completely occupying the presidency, driving Nixon out of office. The key break in the case came when they discovered that there was a taping system in the White House where everything the president said or even thought was taped, and that was controlled by a button under Nixon's desk. That set off a 6-month battle over who could get access to the tapes, and ultimately led to a Supreme Court unanimous decision that Nixon had to turn them over. The tapes were very incriminating and showed Nixon planning to pay off the FBI and the CIA to cover up the burglary. Nixon apparently wanted the FBI and the CIA to believe that the burglary was related to the CIA's role in the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, and that was enough incentive for the CIA to cover it up. After the scandal metastasized for years, paralyzing Nixon and paralyzing the presidency, and ultimately led to Nixon's resignation in 1974, making him the only president ever to resign in office. As we look back on Watergate, we can learn some very important lessons. The first lesson is that presidents can never get away with cover-ups. The media is on their trail and is vigilant in going after that. The second lesson is that the scandals like this paralyze the presidency, absolutely make it impossible for the commander-in-chief to function. And we later found out when Bill Clinton was immersed in the Monica Lewinsky scandal that Osama bin Laden used Clinton being distracted to plan and launch 9/11, its attacks on the United States. Nixon's legacy was destroyed by the Watergate scandal. And in fact, the balance between the executive branch and the Congress was altered fundamentally. And after years of a dominant executive branch under Kennedy and Johnson and Nixon, the Congress asserted itself and began to aggregate power in the wake of the scandal. In next week's video, we'll talk about the shift in congressional power versus executive power that took place in 1974. Today's lunch alert is sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. The clients of Bank of America sold $7 billion in stocks last week, the largest amount since 2020. Institutional clients, pension funds, and hedge funds were the biggest sellers. Meanwhile, Elon Musk warns that America is going bankrupt, and 3/4 of our June tax receipts at the federal level was simply to pay the interest on the national debt that has now risen to $35 trillion. Peter Brandt put it best. He said, all paper currencies are being destroyed. The question for us is, do we want Kamala Harris to be the one in charge of this economic and currency revolution? Call the Patriot Gold Group today and protect your savings by putting them in gold. The Patriot Gold Group offers no fee for life IRAs to viewers of these videos. The IRA minimums are $25,000 and $100,000 for the no fee for life IRA. So call the Patriot Gold Group and ask for the no fee for life IRA.